Welcome to Season 2 of EdLab, a podcast of the University of Virginia School of Education and Human Development. I'm your host, Audrey Breen.
It caused lots of deans to step back and say, how do we get the story out about what we do and why we're so important and why professionalizing teaching in particular as a career is so important?
I'm so excited to kick off Season 2 with a conversation with our dean, Stephanie Rowley. Stephanie Rowley is the William R. Keenan Jr. Professor of Education and has been serving as Dean of the School of Education and Human Development since 2022. Before returning here to UVA, where she earned her PhD, Dean Rowley served as Dean of Teachers College at Columbia University and nearly 20 years on the faculty at the University of Michigan. Today, in addition to sharing some of her favorite advice to students at the beginning of an academic year, Dean Rowley shares what schools of education and human development do and why that matters now more than ever. Welcome, Dean Rowley. I am so excited to have you, and I'm thrilled that you joined us. So thank you for taking the time.
Thrilled to be here.
Thank you. We are kicking off Season 2 at the beginning of an academic year. I personally love this time of year. I love seeing the students return. It's always a little eerily quiet over the summer. What inspires you about the beginning of a semester?
So like you, the summer is super quiet, and just to hear all the voices in the hallway outside my office is so wonderful. And I think, I always think of the beginning of the school year like blank slate. You can be anything, do anything, learn anything, meet new people, and it's just so exciting. And you can see that in the students that they are really happy to be here.
Yeah. Does it feel a little different doing that as a dean than it did in your prior roles?
It does feel different as a dean because I feel like all the students are my students, and
I love that.
I just love walking through the hallways and randomly talking to people and asking them where they're from and what they're doing and, what they want to do ultimately. And so I do have a different feeling of connection as a dean. It's wonderful.
Do you have any advice for the students as you think about some of them starting a brand new program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell every group of students, every orientation group, the same thing, which is they are their own best resources. They meaning their class of students, their peers, and really just to lean into that, to get to know other people, to challenge themselves, challenge other people's thinking, and really take advantage of being in a place where you have people from all over the world together and who have had very different experiences, and learn about that and kind of open your mind.
That's so cool. In Season 1, it was such an honor to talk to so many of our faculty and staff who do incredible work here. Most of them work in a specific area. Of course, as dean, you have a much broader perspective. When you consider all of the incredible work that we do here in the context of the challenges with shortages of teachers to a potential closure of the Department of Education, how do you think about our work and what schools of education and human development contribute?
Well, that's actually a question I think about every single day. I think, especially with the conversation about the closure of the Department of Education, it caused lots of deans to step back and say, how do we get the story out about what we do and why we're so important and why professionalizing teaching in particular as a career is so important. So people really can start to believe that anybody can be a teacher. It's easy. You don't need any special training or preparation. And that's certainly not true. And so part of what I think about as a dean of a school of education and human development is really very much focused on how we get the word out about the importance of teachers. But then there are all kinds of other things too. So, first of all, we're a school of education and human development, which means that in addition to the traditional education fields like education policy and higher education and teacher preparation, leadership preparation, we also have kinesiology and exercise physiology,
right,
and communication sciences and disorders and psychology. And so for me, I think a school like this really contributes by bringing those different fields together and saying, how do we think about a whole person, their psychological needs, their physical needs, their educational needs, and how do we think about human flourishing in a way that kind of leans on all of those disciplines? And then how can we have our faculty and scholars who are studying these things take all of those things into account, and so really engage in high quality interdisciplinary research that I think has been the hallmark of what we do. So the teacher education, the interdisciplinarity. I would say the other thing that a lot of people aren't aware of, probably even some of our faculty, is that as dean, I do a lot of work, in virtually every education school dean does a lot of work with state government. So we work really closely on developing policies. We meet regularly with the Secretary of Education, so we understand what's on her plate. And then she sort of picks our brains all the time about what's happening for us and what's happening with our school partners, so that we can really work together to affect policy and practice. And so then as deans across the country, we get together from time to time to think about how we can sort of have an impact on policy at a federal and state level.
That is so cool. You did mention preparing teachers. I know one of the things that you have mentioned before in articles is this idea of teacher shortage being something that is top of mind. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe what is offering some hope around how we're filling classrooms?
Yeah, so this is the thing that literally keeps me up at night. I spend a lot of time thinking about the teacher shortage and just understanding that children are spending so much of their time in schools, and a good quality teacher has such a huge effect on the child's entire future. So really can change the trajectory of a child's life. And unfortunately, because we have such a dramatic shortage of teachers, so we have children in hundreds of thousands of classrooms that are being taught either by a long-term substitute or by a teacher who was trained in an area outside of what they're teaching, or a teacher who doesn't have a license. So where these classes are being taught by people who are underqualified. And of course, those classrooms are likely to be in low-income areas, urban areas, rural areas, areas with lots of children of color, with language learners and English language learners and the like. And so the most vulnerable children are often without high-quality teachers. So it's really critical. I think that we've seen some progress in the past year or so, certainly in Virginia.
That's great.
Where we had fewer empty classrooms at the beginning of this last school year. And it sounds like we're going to have fewer, even more this year. And some of that is that we have been talking a lot about the teacher shortage and trying to work with state and federal folks who can help to provide scholarship funds that will be enticing to students to go into education, but also trying to improve the conditions of teachers so that they're likely to stay. Because what we really need is for our veteran teachers to be willing to stay in the classroom. Yeah. And we know that this work is so hard. So I think that we're headed in the right direction. I'm always inspired by our own students, where I meet so many students who continue to be really energized by the idea of being a teacher. Students who really understand the impact that they can have, and they are really committed to doing that. So folks continue to show up. And so I think there are lots of things to be hopeful for.
Good. We've talked a little bit about kind of the global perspective of your, the way you're thinking about your work as dean. I'm curious. I interviewed Jamie Giroux. For those who haven't listened, there's another whole podcast on curiosity. Are there things that you find yourself curious about, both professionally or personally?
So I have so many things that I have been really curious about. I'll avoid the AI answer because I feel like that is something that probably occupies way too much of my time and thinking and being curious about. So one of the things that has really hit me lately as sort of a person of a certain age is what sustains people with work. So a lot of this is related to the teacher shortage.
Yeah.
And what I hear from people so often is that it's such hard work and they're feeling burned out and just want to try something different. And I have a shocking number of friends who are saying, maybe I'd like to retire early and do something different or just not work. And so on the one hand, I feel like I'm hearing a lot about people who are tired and wanting to sort of step out of the workplace. And then on the other hand, I see people who are willing to take on these really challenging roles and to stay committed to them for a long time. So one of my good friend's daughters is a wildfire fighter in Oregon,
wow.
Right? And so I was looking at her, looking out over a fire, thinking, what sustains her to stay in such a dangerous and important and threatening field? I think about college administrators. What sustains people to stay in this work that can be challenging? I think about teachers and, for those folks who've been teaching for 30 years, what is the thing that keeps people going? And so I would love to figure that out and bottle it up and figure out how for all of these really challenging things, how we can support people to keep going.
That is such an interesting question. I think all of our work is generated by these questions of, I wish I knew this, or what if we could figure this out? Fast forward a decade, we are having a conversation in 10 years. What do you hope to know in 10 years that we don't yet have an answer to?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I'll say I just came from just a meeting with one of our amazing alum. So she was in the Master's of Teaching program. She graduated in 2020. And we were talking about, so she spent some time in Costa Rica as a teacher. And we were talking about how different teaching is in just the educational system.
Right.
And one of the contrasts that we were talking about is how our system, in moving toward accountability and standards, has sort of squeezed out a lot of creativity and flexibility, and in some cases, critical thinking and curiosity even. And so on the one hand, it feels like going back to a time where there was more time and space for creative outlets and learning. Sounds great. And it sounds a little scary too, because it also feels like if we let go of standards, if we let go of accountability, particularly from an equity standpoint, are we saying that In some spaces, we're okay with kids who are just creative, and all kinds of questions about who and how that would happen. And I realized that there's not a lot of research that really gets at the heart of that question. So how do we figure out a balance between rigor, accountability, and standards-based learning, and creativity and critical thinking and flexibility, and even, sort of teacher creativity and curiosity, and those sorts of things. And so my hope is that in fewer than 10 years, but hopefully in 10 years, we will know how to work with students in a way that ignites their excitement about their passion for learning in a way that also isn't without the rigor.
We'll put a little stop clock and see if we can get it under the 10-year mark.
Indeed.
Okay, I cannot let you escape before asking a question that we have also asked over the course of all of the episodes of season 1, and that is about partnerships. You've already talked about connecting with the partners at the Department of Education here in Virginia and your colleagues across the country. How else are partnerships a part of your work and how you see kind of how we work as a school?
So partnerships are a central aspect of our strategic plan here in the School of Education and Human Development. And there are all kinds of partners. So we work with community-based organizations, so lots of organizations across the state, across the country. We work with university systems, community college systems, and the like. And I think really our most important partnerships are often the local partnerships. So working closely with the schools in our area. So as an example, we have a lab school with Charlottesville Middle School, as it's called now.
I'm having to learn that.
It is difficult to learn the new name, but where we're bringing kind of computational thinking to the curriculum and preparing teachers to use more computational skills in the classroom. That's been amazing. But I think as a sort of a broader frame, what we really try to do is translate the research that we're doing into actionable bits where schools can take that information and really make improvements to what they do every day. And this happens informally, and it happens in really formal ways like professional development and workshops and those sorts of things, but also just through our daily interactions that happen all the time.
Yeah. I'm excited about the lab school. Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been a pleasure. I'm thrilled to start off the new season with you, and I'm excited about, that energy of back to school. And
yes, can't wait to see the students.
Yeah, they'll be here very, very soon.
Any moment now.
EdLab is a production of the University of Virginia School of Education and Human Development and WTJU 91.1 FM. EdLab is produced and hosted by Audrey Breen with support from Mary Garner McGee and Sage Tongway. Our music is Palms Down by Blue Dot Sessions. You can subscribe to EdLab wherever you get your favorite podcasts.